Hello and welcome to a special edition of Need to Know. This is David Rothkopf, and we are going to be joined today by Senator Elissa Slotkin. She is the junior senator from Michigan. She'll become the senior senator from Michigan in a couple of years. She previously served as the representative from Michigan's 7th and 8th districts. Prior to her time in Congress, Senator Slotkin was a CIA analyst and worked in national security roles in the Pentagon and the White House under Presidents Bush and Obama. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have this opportunity to talk. There's a lot to talk about, so I'll just sort of rattle them off in kind of machine gun fashion. We're still in a government shutdown.
Yeah.
What does it mean in Michigan?
Well, I mean, certainly as a former federal worker, it means that our federal workers are either at home or they're working without a paycheck. And I've lived through a bunch of these. They are not fun. And it means in this scenario that Trump is taking the opportunity to try and cut programs, personnel that are targeted at specific states. I mean, I think yesterday he cut all the people who are working on special ed at the Department of Education, which is a big deal in a state like mine. So it is, I don't think it's ever a positive thing when there's a government shutdown. And so that's why the Senate at least is here trying to figure it out.
Yeah, same cannot be said for the House at the moment. One of the elements of this, of course, is that Democrats have chosen this moment to say we need to defend health care for Americans. And that seems to have some traction because we're going from the abstractions of the so-called big beautiful bill to the reality that people are starting to get notices saying your premiums are going to double or triple or quadruple, or we're going to lose services in this hospital. And I'm just wondering again, how does that resonate with you and with the people of Michigan?
I mean, look, I can't think of an issue that's more personal than health care. And when the president signed off on the big, beautiful bill, he basically precipitated a healthcare crisis where, if you're on Medicaid, obviously, soon you're going to have different requirements. But very importantly, if you're on healthcare.gov, the marketplace plans, your plans are most likely going to double this November, like November 1st. And then in order to compensate, the hospitals and the healthcare companies still want to make their money. So they're just increasing everyone who's on employer-provided private insurance, increasing their rates for January. So we put out a call in Michigan and we just said, hey, have you been notified of your increase? Please let us know. And we got over 500 letters in about 2 days. And they're wrenching stories. I mean, these are people who are saying like, I have a small business. I have a childcare business in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and I'm just not going to be able to provide health care for my 7 employees anymore because my rates just doubled. So it's a very real thing for people. As you said, in a world where there's just like a constant flow of news, this is the one that really hits people's pocketbooks and affects their kids. So it's very personal. Trump administration has brought us to this point. And, that is where the negotiations should and will start on ending the government shutdown.
Well, you just made it personal for me. My wife is from Ypsilanti, Michigan.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
And so we're there and we see it. But I think that's kind of where we are in American politics more broadly, which is, you have an election, there are a lot of promises. You get into a debate about budgets and things like that, it seems a million miles away from people's lives. And then you start having consequences. And, we're entering, sort of the year of consequences now through the election next November. And healthcare is part of it. But you also hear competing narratives that, they don't jibe, right? So Democrats have expressed real concern that rural hospitals will be shut down, including rural hospitals in a lot of red states and red areas. And the Republicans say, well, we put a Band-Aid on that in the bill. There's going to be plenty of money for rural hospitals. But that's not true, is it?
No. And I mean, we've already started to see one of my rural hospitals in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan has shut down birth and delivery services. So now if you're from the Western UP, you have to drive to Wisconsin to deliver a baby, right? I mean, it is very real. And I think certainly our Michigan Hospital Association has said they're losing $10 billion over the next 10 years from their hospitals, separate from Obamacare and all the other plans. So it's a very real thing. And I think, the truth is, what do you do when the entire election, Trump's entire winning strategy was on lowering costs? That was the whole deal, right? Every, ad, every, poster, every digital ad. And I think people know their own pocketbooks. They may not understand what's going on and the details in Washington. They may not care about wonky political stuff, but they care and they know how much they save every month, and they know whether they can afford, a vacation or a summer camp for their kids. They understand their own pocketbooks. They are masters of their own pocketbooks. So you can't fool them into thinking that their costs are down. And while some people, certainly in Michigan, are still like, he's got a grand plan, there's going to be pain up front, but then it's all going to be worth it. We're going to have, a ton of jobs return, and we all hope for jobs coming back to a place like Michigan. The proof is going to be in the pudding, and people are not stupid.
No, they're not. And, politics doesn't matter to most people. Their pocketbook matters. Their lives matter, whether their kids can go to school or whether their mother has to come live with them because she can't get Medicaid to pay for, care. Resonates with them. But another whole area of things that resonates, my background is national security and foreign policy, just like yours is. And when we sit down and talk to people about that, for a long time people go, well, Americans don't care. But I would argue that that's not true, and that they're starting to care in a lot of ways because these things hit home. And so just to pick up on what you're talking about with the terms of the cost of living, the president has made a decision to impose tariffs. We're in a trade war with the world. Prices of things are going up dramatically. It's not legal. He doesn't have power to do that. But while it's being hashed out in the courts, people are feeling the pinch. When you talk to people in Michigan, does the word tariff resonate with them?
Well, I certainly think I can't imagine there's a state more affected by tariffs than Michigan because of our heavy manufacturing sector, because of our border with Canada and the fact that we built supply chains kind of almost without regard to the border. And then because farming is a big industry, and that's where the retaliatory tariffs are really punching us in the face. Again, I'm not personally against all tariffs in general. We've had sugar tariffs on, foreign sugar for long before I was born, right? But I'm against sloppy tariffs. And that's what I think Michiganders understand, this on again, off again. Will he, won't he? More tariffs on Canada right now than on China. People understand the sloppiness of this. And our farmers now certainly understand that they're working our way towards needing a bailout again. Because of the retaliatory tariffs. And our farmers don't like taking handout checks. That's not what they want. So it definitely resonates that this is a sloppy approach. Again, there are some people who still feel like, maybe this is all going to work out in the end, who are still with them. But I'll give you just one example of kind of just rank and file. I was pumping gas, this is a couple months ago now, I was pumping gas, and some guys in a truck next to me, with a Trump sticker on it, were pumping gas, and they recognized me, and we had a good, amiable conversation. They're like, oh yeah, you're the Democrat, we know you. And I said, yeah, hey, how you doing? And they said, I don't agree with you guys on this and this, and I'm like, I get it, understood. And then went back to pumping their gas. And then the guy came back around and he said, I will tell you one thing though, I don't like this yo-yo shit on tariffs. And I think that kind of captures the sentiment, meaning, there's not some massive sea change going on. People haven't completely given up on Donald Trump, but they do not like the things that directly affect their pocketbooks. And in Michigan, tariffs do. And we saw that very clearly with back to school shopping. I heard a lot about tariffs and how expensive it was to pay for back to school clothing and school supplies this year compared to last year.
Yeah, so let me give you another example, and I'm interested to see whether it resonates, because it seems far, far away, right? Argentina is far, far away. But if somebody is told, we can't pay for special education in your district, but we can send $40 billion to Argentina, for political reasons. I mean, the president's even said, if you change leaders, I'm not sending you the money. It would seem to me that is something that could also resonate with people.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, there's so much news. No one likes bailing out a country that most Michiganders don't engage with a whole lot. I mean, that we don't think about Argentina on a daily basis. It's not a country that we do a lot of business with in Michigan. So most Michiganders are just like, what are you talking about that you're given $40 billion? It's now 40, right? They doubled it yesterday. $40 billion to a country that most Michiganders don't ever visit or think about. And then at the same time, we got 20 million people who are about to fall off their health insurance because they can't afford it. So I think people don't understand those things. I will say the president is very good at flooding the zone and saturating every single day and every single news cycle with so much news that it's hard for people to figure out kind of what's a passing story and what's a strategic and irreversible problem. And that's a purposeful strategy by the president, but it is also an effective strategy so that so many people have just kind of shut off the news. They don't have a news app on their phone. They're not paying attention to the daily grind. They're just knowing exactly how much they save and spend every month. So that to me is still the biggest driver of change over everything else.
Well, these issues touch people's lives in a variety of ways. And I know that you entered the national security community in the wake of 9/11, and you were involved. You were in Iraq. You were involved in the war on terror. You saw it from multiple perspectives. And that was the last time the United States had a really big shift in its national security strategy from sort of the geopolitics of the Cold War era into the war on terror. But we have a new national security strategy coming down the pike, we hear. We've got a national defense strategy coming down the pike. And even if those things sound abstract to most Americans, we are seeing the president decide to use the intelligence community, the FBI, the military, in a whole new way. And so we've gone from the war on terror to what you might call the war on Americans, because the focus is shifting away from overseas threats. And instead, what he says is, I want to direct it against domestic terror, which he then defines as people who are anti-fascist, anti-Christian, anti-capitalist, anti-him, basically. And, the people who fund that, he is equating with funding terrorism. And you have talked about this. You've been one of the people who's really singled it out, that we've got a shift going on here that's unprecedented in U.S. history and can only be described as authoritarian.
Yeah, I think, again, when you're flooding the zone, or when the zone is being flooded, it's hard to figure out what's truly kind of a passing story and what's strategic. And to me, the domestic terrorism executive order from September, where the president laid out that he's asked the Department of Justice to identify domestic terrorist organizations with these broad characteristics. And the fact that he's not telling us what domestic terrorist organizations are being targeted, right? Who are the named groups? Who are these alleged bad guys? To me, should send the shiver down the spine of any American, because if it's not your group today, it will easily be your group tomorrow. And then the use of the uniformed military in our cities, again, completely counter to our values as Americans, where we literally exist as a country because an occupying military power abused American citizens, and we rose up against that, and then devised a system of laws meant to only use uniformed militaries in extreme cases. I mean, not what's going on in these cities. But the president thinks he looks like a big guy. He looks tough when he puts these uniformed military folks, who I think many of them do not want those missions. They do not want to be there, but puts them out in our American cities. He's looking for an excuse and a pretext to say that there's, chaos, so that he can double down and bring even more military into these cities. So I think, to me, again, in the specter of all the things that the president has done, the use of the uniformed military inside the United States and his flirting with invoking the Insurrection Act of 1807, which is wonky, but gives the ability for these uniformed military to act as police, to conduct raids, to arrest, to detain. And by the way, our military is not trained for that. They're trained to protect us against external threats. That, to me, is where we start to slip into something that doesn't even look and smell like the United States that we all believe in. And the good news is, I think a lot of Americans look at those images and they say, that's not us. I don't like the way that feels and looks, and that's a good thing. But man, I mean, I think it has been part of the playbook of this administration to create that pretext, put in the military, use them in law enforcement roles potentially, suspend habeas corpus, declare martial law. I wish these things were out of just like a history book from another country. But if we, at this point, we can't have a failure of imagination. We have to accept that they're on this path because they've shown nothing but a willingness to use that authoritarian playbook that we've seen so many times abroad.
Right, and the authoritarian playbook abroad often involves a president or a head of state or other leader saying, there's an emergency, there is a threat. And the president is doing that here, and he's saying there's an immigration invasion when there isn't one, or there's a war in Portland when there isn't a war in Portland, or something is a terror threat when it isn't. We've seen this week the State Department announced they're revoking the visas of 8 different people who committed the crime of posting on social media something unflattering about Charlie Kirk. Again, that runs counter to our free speech beliefs. And I'm interested in the degree to which these things resonate. But just to take it a step further, I mentioned my wife from Ypsilanti. Her mother teaches English as a second language in the schools of Ypsilanti. There are a lot of kids there from all over the world, and they're terrified of going out, going to church, of going shopping, of driving in case somebody says they have a broken taillight, because of the invasion, not of some foreign power, but of ICE, a bunch of untrained sort of folks populating, masked throngs of ICE going into these cities. And I'm wondering, how is there a backlash against that?
Well, it's interesting. We've been hearing that, of course, Ypsilanti, but lots of areas of the state. West side of the state of Michigan has a large Latino population. I went to the Hispanic Festival in August in Grand Rapids. It was half the size that it was the year before because people are just scared to be in a place where they know, law enforcement knows, there's lots of Latinos. And these are American citizens and immigrants. I mean, both. Mexican restaurants are seeing a real dip in their sales. People are just scared to go to that restaurant. I mean, I think, and certainly I've heard the stories of American citizens, of Mexican descent or from somewhere else, who are carrying their American passports with them in case they ever got pulled over. That kind of use of fear as a weapon is, to me, again, part of this un-American set of values that's being implemented. And what I find is that a lot of people who may have even supported the president, voted for him, will say well, I don't want my local people treated like that, right? These are folks who work in my community. They go to school in my community. They work on the farm that I own, and whatever it is, they're not here, right? That might work for someone else, but it doesn't make sense here, and I don't like hearing that my neighbors are terrified. So again, I think at least in a place like Michigan, where people have sort of those common sense, good values, there is a real abhorrence of the look and feel of authoritarianism. Now, what they're willing to do about it is a different question, and I think that's coming to a theater near us. If it comes to so many communities, so many places we hold dear, how do people react as allies? That's yet to be seen, but it is definitely something that is happening across certainly the state of Michigan, but I know across the country.
Well, we all of us, particularly those of us who spend a lot of time in Washington, run into consultants, and they're always giving these kind of brilliant ideas of what people should do or not do to win elections. And often I'll hear people say, well, democracy, that doesn't resonate with people. They don't, that's abstract. The rule of law is abstract to people. But seeing your neighbor get dragged away is not abstract. Just like losing your health care is not abstract. And that's just what I'm talking about when I talk about consequences. Democrats get criticized for seeming weak on these issues. And yet there does seem to be a little movement, of which you are a leader, where, you know, there was a group of you who came into the Congress, and now one of you is about to become governor of Virginia, and another one's about to, I hope, become the governor of my home state, New Jersey, and there's you, who are women who came out of national security, who talk about strength. And it's not that you're winning races necessarily because you worked in Iraq or you were, you know, Assistant Secretary of Defense, but because Americans want leaders who are strong because they believe they can fix the problems. And so, yeah, and if you say I'm strong and you're not, just like you say I'm a change agent and, you know, you're coming from a long line of special interests, it just doesn't scan. But if you come from a background like yours or Abigail Spanberger's, whatever, you don't have to say it. People know it. And I'm wondering whether that's, you think, going to infuse Democrats and can be used to turn the tide here politically in this country.
Well, look, I think, you know, part of the reason that we're able to win in these tough elections that we've all had is we have a few more ounces of what I call alpha energy that we bring to the fight. And that, you know, at least in the Midwestern context, I can tell you, like, if you have a plan, you know, even if whatever issue we care about is like in the toilet, if you have a plan to get us from the darkness to the light and you can explain that and you can run that play and do it with vigor and with force, people will follow. They want someone who has confidence. The most popular person in the state of Michigan is certainly not a politician. It's Dan Campbell, the coach of the Detroit Lions. And he took a team that was in the toilet and had a plan, and we're now, going to win the Super Bowl this year, FYI. And that, to me, there we go. Wow, on cue, the Lions hat. Amazing. So you understand that is some alpha energy that he gives off, right? And people want that from their coaches, of course, but also from their leaders. And it doesn't mean you have to have all the answers. And Dan Campbell will yell at you when you get something wrong, and he'll hug you and cry when you get something right. It doesn't mean you're going to be perfect, but it means you don't just sit there twiddling your thumbs in defeat. You actually come up with a plan to play some offense and not just defense against this administration. And I think that's what many of us with a national security background are struggling with, is like, we come from an environment where you don't just roll over and play weak defense. You go on offense. There's no winning a war or winning a game without playing offense. And so I certainly know that those of us with service backgrounds, because we talk, we have text chains, we're, you know, socialized, we're friends, that those of us in office from that background want a Democratic Party that will play some damn offense and like come into its power and be some like wartime generals, because it's not peacetime right now. With the way this administration is weaponizing the U.S. government. And we all swore an oath to the Constitution. We all believe in our bones in what America can and should be, and we're willing to stand up for that. So I'm going to be thrilled to watch my two friends become governors. And I just am really excited that we're going to have more leaders, and we have so many coming up who are fighters, who aren't just complacent with playing defense.
I got to tell you, you're really speaking to the converted here. I came to Washington in the 90s, joined the Clinton administration, became the Deputy Undersecretary, then Undersecretary of Commerce, and I came away with one conclusion. You win when you play offense, you lose when you play defense. And that is just the rule of Washington. It's the rule of jungle. It's the rule of American politics. And you need people who understand that. I think you clearly do. And we are extremely fortunate to have you where you are. And hopefully we'll be able to persuade you back. I mean, I do have this Lions paraphernalia. It's actually...
now that I know.
Well, it kills two birds with one stone, because I have a Michigan wife, and also I taught for many years at a school you attended, CEPA, Columbia. Right. And so it's the same lion. that the line works for both of them.
It's true. I'm a little partial to the Detroit Lions. On that
Yeah,
one, I
these
will say,
days,
but-
these days, given the way Colombia has behaved with regard to Trump's intimidation, I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. Anyway, I know you've got to vote, so go vote. But thank you so much, and hopefully we'll be able to coax you back for continuation of the conversation at some point when you have a moment in the not too distant future.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.